Good morning. Today's Bible reading comes from Matthew 15 through 16 and Mark 7 through 8. All right, let's get into it. After that, the Pharisees and religion scholars came to Jesus all the way from Jerusalem, criticizing, "Why do your disciples play fast and loose with the rules?" But Jesus put it right back on them. Why do you use your rules to play fast and loose with God's commands? God clearly says, respect your father and mother, and anyone denouncing father or mother should be killed. But you weasel around that by saying, whoever wants to can say to father and mother, what I owed to you, I've given to God. That can hardly be called respecting a parent. You cancel God's command by your rules. Frauds. Isaiah's prophecy of you hit the bullseyes. These people make a big show of saying the right thing, but their heart isn't in it. They act like they're worshiping me, but they don't mean it. They just use me as a cover for teaching whatever suits their fancy. He then called the crowd together and said, listen and take this to heart. It's not what you swallow that pollutes your life, but what you vomit up. Later his disciples came and told him, did you know how upset the Pharisees were when they heard what you said? Jesus shrugged it off. Every tree that wasn't planted by my Father in heaven will be pulled up by its roots. Forget them. They are blind men leading blind men. When a blind man leads a blind man, they both end up in the ditch. Peter said, I don't get it. Put it in plain language. Jesus replied, you too? Are you being willfully stupid? Don't you know that anything that is swallowed works its way through the intestines and is finally defecated? But what comes out of the mouth gets its start in the heart. It's from the heart that we vomit up evil arguments, murders, adulteries, fornications, thefts, lies, and cussing. That's what pollutes. Eating or not eating certain foods, washing or not washing your hands. That's neither here nor there. From there, Jesus took a trip to Tyre and Sidon. They had hardly arrived when a Canaanite woman came down from the hills and pleaded, Mercy, Master, Son of David. My daughter is cruelly afflicted by an evil spirit. Jesus ignored her. The disciples came and complained, now she's bothering us. Would you please take care of her? She's driving us crazy. Jesus refused, telling them, I've got my hands full dealing with the lost sheep of Israel. Then the woman came back to Jesus, went to her knees, and begged, Master, help me. He said, it is not right to take bread out of children's mouths and throw it to dogs. She was quick. You're right, Master. But beggar dogs do get scraps from the Master's table. Jesus gave in. Oh, woman, your faith is something else. What you want is what you get. Right then her daughter became well. After Jesus returned, he walked along Lake Galilee and then climbed a mountain and took his place, ready to receive visitors. They came, tons of them, bringing along the paraplegic, the blind, the maimed, the mute, all sorts of people in need, and more or less threw them down at Jesus' feet to see what he would do with them. He healed them. When the people saw the mute speaking, the maimed healthy, the paraplegics walking around, and the blind looking around, they were astonished and let everyone know that God was blazingly alive among them. But Jesus wasn't finished with them. He called for his disciples and said, I hurt for these peoples. For 3 days now they've been with me, and now they can have nothing to eat. I can't send them away without a meal. They'll probably collapse on the road. His disciples said But where in this deserted place are you going to dig up enough food for a meal? Jesus asked. How much bread do you have? 7 loaves, they said, plus a few fish. At that, Jesus directed the people to sit down. He took the 7 loaves and the fish. After giving thanks, he divided it up and gave it to the people. Everyone ate. They had all they wanted. It took 7 large baskets to collect the leftovers. Over 4,000 people ate their fill at the meal. After Jesus sent them away, he climbed in the boat and crossed over to the Magadan hills. Some Pharisees and Sadducees were on him again, pressing him to prove himself to them. He told them, "You have a saying that goes, 'Red sky at night, sailors delight. Red sky at morning, sailors take warning.' You find it easy enough to forecast the weather. Why can't you read the signs of the times? An evil and wanton generation is always wanting signs and wonders. The only sign you'll get is the Jonah sign." Then he turned on his heel and walked away. On their way to the other side of the lake, the disciples discovered they'd forgotten to bring along bread. In the meantime, Jesus said to them, "Keep a sharp eye out for the Sadducees yeast." Thinking he was scolding them for forgetting bread, they discussed in whispers what to do. Jesus knew what they were doing and said, "Why all these worried whispers about forgetting the bread? Runt believers, haven't you caught on yet? Don't you remember the 5 loaves of bread and the 5,000 people and how many baskets of fragments you picked up? Or the 7 loaves that fed 4,000 and how many baskets of leftovers you collected? Haven't you realized yet that bread isn't the problem? The problem is yeast, Pharisee and Sadducee yeast." Then they got it, that he wasn't concerned about eating, but teaching, the Pharisee and Sadducee kind of teaching. When Jesus arrived in the villages of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "What are the people saying about who the Son of Man is?" They replied, "Some think he is John the Baptizer. Some say Elijah. Some say Jeremiah or one of the other prophets." He pressed them, "And how about you? Who do you say I am?" Simon Peter said, "You are the Christ, the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Jesus came back. "God bless you, Simon, son of Jonah. You didn't get that answer out of the books or from teachers. My Father in heaven, God himself, let you in on this secret of who I really am. And now I'm going to tell you who you really are. You are Peter, a rock. This is the rock on which I will put together my church, a church so expansive with energy that not even the gates of hell will be able to keep it out. And that's not all. You will have complete and free access to God's kingdom. Keys to open any door and every door. No more barriers between heaven and earth and heaven. Yes on earth is yes in heaven, and no one on earth, and a no on earth is a no in heaven. He swore the disciples to secrecy. He made them promise they would tell no one that he was the Messiah. Then Jesus made it clear to his disciples that it was now necessary for him to go to Jerusalem, submit to an ordeal of suffering at the hands of the religious leaders, be killed, and then on the 3rd day be raised up alive. Peter took him in hand, protesting, "Impossible, Master, that can never be." But Jesus didn't swerve. "Peter, get out of my way. Satan, get lost. You have no idea how God works." Then Jesus went to work on his disciples. "Anyone who intends to come with me has to let me lead. You're not in the driver's seat. I am. Don't run from suffering. Embrace it. Follow me, and I'll show you how. Self-help is no help at all. Self-sacrifice is the way, my way, to finding yourself, your true self. What kind of deal is it to get everything you want, but lose yourself? What could you ever trade your soul for? Don't be in such a hurry to go into business for yourself. Before you know it, the Son of Man will arrive with all the splendor of his Father, accompanied by an army of angels. You'll get everything you have coming to you, a personal gift. This isn't pie in the sky by and by. Some of you standing here are going to see it take place. See the Son of Man in kingdom glory. Mark 7 and 8. The Pharisees, along with some religion scholars who had come from Jerusalem, gathered around him. They noticed that some of his disciples weren't being careful with ritual washings before meals. The Pharisees, Jews in general, in fact, would never eat a meal without going through the motions of a ritual, hand washing, with an especially vigorous scrubbing, if they had just come from the market, to say nothing of the scourings. They'd give jugs and pots and pans. The Pharisees and religion scholars asked, "Why do your disciples flout the rules, showing up in meals without washing their hands?" Jesus answered, "Isaiah was right about frauds like you. Hit the bullseye, in fact. These people make a big show of saying the right thing, but their heart isn't in it. They act like they're worshiping me, but they don't mean it. They just use me as a cover for teaching whatever suits their fancy, ditching God's command and taking up the latest fads." He went on, "Well, good for you. You get rid of God's commands so you won't be inconvenienced in following the religious fashions. Moses said, 'Respect your father and mother,' and anyone denouncing father or mother should be killed. But you weasel out of it by saying that it is perfectly acceptable to say to father or mother, 'Gift. What I owed you, I have given as a gift to God,' thus relieving yourselves of obligation to father or mother. You scratch out God's word and scrawl a whim in its place. You do a lot of things like this." Jesus called the crowd together again and said, "Listen now, all of you. Take this to heart. It's not what you swallow that pollutes your life. It's what you vomit. That's the real pollution." When he was back home after being with the crowd, his disciples said, "We don't get it. Put it in plain language." Jesus said, "Are you being willfully stupid? Don't you see that what you swallow can't contaminate you? It doesn't enter your heart, but your stomach, works its way through the intestines, and is finally flushed. That took care of the dietary quibbling. Jesus was saying that all foods are fit to eat." He went on, "It's what comes out of the person that pollutes: obscenities, lust, thefts, murders, adulteries, greed, depravity, deceptive dealings, carousing, mean looks, slander, arrogance, and foolishness. All these are vomit from the heart. There is the source of your pollution." From there, Jesus set out for the vicinity of Tyre. He entered a house there where he didn't think he would be found, but he couldn't escape notice. He was barely inside when a woman who had a disturbed daughter heard where he was. She came and knelt at his feet, begging for help. The woman was Greek, Syro-Phoenician by birth. She asked him to cure her daughter. He said, "Stand in line and take your turn. The children get fed first. If there's any left over, the dogs get it." She said, "Of course, master, but don't dogs under the table get scraps dropped by the children?" Jesus was impressed. "You're right. On your way. Your daughter is no longer disturbed. The demonic affliction is gone. She went home and found her daughter relaxed on the bed, and the torment gone for good. Then he left the region of Tyre, went through Sidon, back to Galilee Lake, and over to the district of the 10 towns. Some people brought a man who could neither hear nor speak, and asked Jesus to lay a healing hand on him. He took the man off by himself, put his fingers in the man's ear. Some spit on the man's tongue. Then Jesus looked up in prayer, groaned mightily, and commanded, Ephphatha, open up. And it happened. The man's hearing was clear and his speech plain, just like that. Jesus urged them to keep quiet, but they talked it all up the more, beside themselves with excitement. He's done it all and done it well. He gives hearing to the deaf, speech to the speechless. At about this same time, he again found himself with a hungry crowd on his hands. He called his disciples together and said, This crowd is breaking my heart. They have stuck with me for 3 days, and now they have nothing to eat. If I send them home hungry, they'll faint along the way. Some of them have come a long distance. His disciples responded, What do you expect us to do about it? Buy food out here in the desert? He asked. How much bread do you have? 7 loaves, they said. So Jesus told the crowd to sit down on the ground. After giving thanks, he took the 7 bread loaves, broke them into pieces, and gave them to his disciples, so they could hand them out to the crowd. They also had a few fish. He pronounced a blessing over the fish and told his disciples to hand them out as well. The crowd ate its fill. 7 sacks of leftovers were collected. There were well over 4,000 at the meal. Then he sent them home. He himself went straight to the boat with his disciples and set out for Dalmanutha. It's hard to pronounce. When they arrived, the Pharisees came out and started in on him, badgering him to prove himself, pushing him up against the wall. Provoked, he said, Why does this generation clamor for miraculous guarantees? If I have anything to say about it, you'll not get so much as a hint of a guarantee. He then left them, got back in the boat, and headed for the other side. But the disciples forgot to pack a lunch. Except for a single loaf of bread, there wasn't a crumb in the boat. Jesus warned, Be very careful. Keep a sharp eye out for the contaminating yeast of Pharisees and the followers of Herod. Meanwhile, the disciples were finding fault with each other because they'd forgotten to bring bread. Jesus overheard and said, Why are you fussing because you forgot bread? Don't you see the point of all this? Don't you get it at all? Remember the 5 loaves I broke for the 5,000? How many baskets of leftovers did you pick up? They said, 12. And the 7 loaves for the 4,000. How many bags full of leftovers did you get? 7. He said, Do you still not get it? They arrived at Bethsaida. Some people brought a sightless man and begged Jesus to give him a healing touch. Taking him by the hand, he led them out of the village. He put spit on the man's eyes, laid his hands on him, and asked, Do you see anything? He looked up. I see men. They look like walking trees. So Jesus laid hands on his eyes again. The man looked hard and realized that he had recovered perfect sight, saw everything in bright 20/20 focus. Jesus sent him straight home, telling him, Don't enter the village. Jesus and his disciples headed out for the villages around Caesarea Philippi. As they walked, he asked, Who do the people say I am? Some say John the Baptizer, they said. Others say Elijah. Still others say one of the prophets. He then asked, And you, what are you saying who I am? About me, who am I? Peter gave the answer, You are the Christ, the Messiah. Jesus warned them to keep it quiet, not to breathe a word of it to anyone. He then began explaining things to them. It is necessary that the Son of Man proceed to an ordeal of suffering, be tried and found guilty by the elders, high priests, and religion scholars, be killed, and after 3 days raise up alive. He said this simply and clearly, so they couldn't miss it. But Peter grabbed him in protest, turning and seeing his disciples wavering, wondering what to believe. Jesus confronted Peter. Peter, get out of my way. Satan, get lost. You have no idea how God works. Calling the crowds to join his disciples, he said, anyone who intends to come with me has to let me lead. You're not in the driver's seat. I am. Don't run from suffering. Embrace it. Follow me and I'll show you how. Self-help is no help at all. Self-sacrifice is the way, my way, to saving yourself, your true self. What good would it do to get everything you want and lose you, the real you? What could you ever trade your soul for? If any of you are embarrassed over me and the way I'm leading you when you get around your fickle and unfocused friends, know that you'll be an even greater embarrassment to the Son of Man when he arrives in all the splendor of God, his Father, with an army of the holy angels. And that is it for today's Bible reading. As always, get in touch with God today, and I will see you again tomorrow. Bye.